this deacon at this church I used to go to that used to say there's more work done in prayer than in work itself. And I still hold true to that. And I would tweak the language and say there is more work done in your imagination, in your dreaming, in your fantasy, in your playfulness than in work itself. That some of the greatest success of my life has happened, even understanding like, oh, I'm doing it wrong. I don't know how to fix it. I will go into my imagination and see myself doing the thing and turn the heat up. I come out of the visualization, I turn the heat up and it works, right? That there is more work, more brilliance, more, shifting that happens in prayer and imagination and dreaming and playing and fantasy than in sitting down and I'm gonna just grind it out. You're doing it wrong. Stop. Go, sit down, take a breath. And so I really wish that I could get people, particularly Black women, to believe that.
Hello and welcome to the Liberated Woman Podcast, where my guests and I empower ambitious, mission-driven women like you to break free from toxic productivity and embrace a joyful, satisfying life. I'm your host, Tamu Thomas, author of Women Who Work Too Much, leadership coach, and keynote speaker. In each episode, we explore personal and professional growth, featuring insightful conversations with inspiring guests, as well as episodes where I explore topics and answer your questions to support your growth and transformation. If you enjoy the show, please do like, subscribe, comment, rate, review, and share. The more listeners I reach, the more impactful guests I can attract to support your journey. Okay, let's begin. Hello, you beautiful humans. I'm trying really hard to sit in my seat. I'm trying really hard to feel the back of my body against the chair I'm sitting on, because right now I feel like I'm lifting up to heavens because I have got EbonyJanice. EbonyJanice. Her name is EbonyJanice. Therefore, you should call her EbonyJanice. Not Ebony, not Janice, but EbonyJanice. EbonyJanice is, okay, let me just tell you lot straight. When we first got on this call, I cried because EbonyJanice's work has meant so much to me. I was part of her Patreon. I've got her book on audio, so I've listened to it. I've got it on Kindle, so I could highlight it and so that I could annotate and whatnot. When I tried to get it from Amazon, sorry, people. Yes, it was Amazon. They had run out, so I got it on Kindle, and it felt like a soothing balm. I saved it to after I'd finished writing my book so that I could properly be present with the book. And I'm just, EbonyJanice, I'm just so delighted that you're here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us. I haven't even told people what you do. So first of all, welcome. And for people that have not had the pleasure of coming into contact and you and what you do, please could you tell us a bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, and why you do it?
So for people that don't know me, the way that you just reemphasize my name so many times in the beginning, it'll seem very weird to them, but it's because kind of my little intro to everything is my name is EbonyJanice. I go by EbonyJanice, which means you should call me EbonyJanice. So now kind of everybody, even my ex-boyfriend used to randomly text me and be like, I go by EbonyJanice. What are you doing today? So it's a real thing. But my name is EbonyJanice. I am a free woman on a love journey. I'm a writer. I'm a creative. I think the most important work that I do is really supporting Black women around the globe and the work of returning to our full sovereignty. And I do that in a lot of different ways, but go to the website and you can find out all that stuff. We don't need that full introduction. I'm here. I'm a free woman. That's who I am.
That's it. And I don't even know where to start first. So I'm going to start with your cousin.
Okay.
Latricia Gordy.
Yes.
I read the section in the chapter in your book, which my brain has just gone haywire. So it's about reclaiming loudness.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I read what you wrote about your cousin, and you said, there was a quote in there about the embodiment of, she is the embodiment of, what are you going to do for freedom today?
Mm-hmm.
And when I read you talking about your cousin and your experience of her, I saw myself on the bus after school when
Mm-hmm.
me and my friends would loudly be singing Jodeci and Mary J. Blige.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw myself as I got a bit older when respectability politics had really
Uh-huh.
taken hold. And it was very much, I can't be like those girls.
Uh-huh.
Please, could you tell me about your cousin and about why you wrote what you wrote about your experience of her and what was perceived to be loudness?
Yeah, thank you for this question because I think in the history of talking about this book, only one other person has ever asked me about Latricia Gowdy, who the book is both dedicated to, and there's a whole chapter introduction that is about her. And my cousin actually was murdered several years ago. So she's not alive in this plane, in this body any longer. And it feels like I feel emotional actually, just the fact that you even brought her up, because so rarely do people bring her up in a conversation, even though she's such a major part of the book. Um, but so it feels like a gift to be able to talk about her and to lift her name as one of my honorable guiding ancestors, and for her life to be so much more than the way that she was taken from us. Because Latricia Gowdy was literally, she's my cousin, but at some point she lived with us for several years. And so like the loudness is a real thing. Like you wake up in the morning and the loudest person in the house is the person who is not even biologically, does not even biologically belong to anybody in the house, is Latricia. And just even with everything that she went through in her life, she was just still so much of herself. And I am 41 years old now, and I feel like I'm just walking up on being as much of myself as I felt like, and as my memory recalls Latricia being when we were children. And so, yeah, when I got ready to think about loudness, she's one of the first people that came to my mind because it's not a metaphor. She really was a very loud person. Like her voice was literally like, "Hey," and and so I feel like I appreciate that affirmation of like both seeing yourself and seeing your judgment of yourself in through Latricia, because I'm also sure that, as a young Black girl growing up in this predominantly white space in, Sandusky, Ohio in the 80s and the 90s, Latricia also had to maneuver through a lot of things just to show up as so much of herself. And now here we are with so much more, I believe, language and even some freedom as a result of that language around what it means to not be dealing in our respectability politics and what it means
Mm.
to be, loud in spite of or despite what other people feel about us. And we're still, in my estimation, trying to catch up with how much of ourselves Latricia was.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I wondered to myself, what would my worldly experience be if I knew that I was entitled? I know a lot of
Uh-huh.
people don't really like that word, but I was entitled to show the world I am alive through the richness, the
Yes.
volume, the velocity, the timbre of my voice, instead of toning it down
Yes.
to fit in to somewhere that didn't make space for me in the first place.
And that's the point. It's literally, like it's both the metaphor and the fact that Latricia was loud, but
Hmm.
like the metaphor of it is that her hair, she had red, green, she's before the Little Kim Crush on You video, like all the different hair colors, the long nails, like that was her personality, really was very loud. And so from her voice to the way that she dressed to her personality to, just her exclamation of herself, she was very out loud. And there are ways in which I think we kind of dip our toes into loudness. Sometimes my personality can be very vibrant, and or sometimes my outfit can be very vibrant, but there's some other portion of myself that I'm watering down. And so I'm interested in what it looks like for us, particularly as Black women, Black femme folk across the globe, to figure out how to embody all that loudness at the same time. It doesn't have to be a decibel. It doesn't have to be
Yeah.
like, on 100, because some of us that can be loud, even with a soft speaking voice. Eartha Kitt,
Hmm.
Janet Jackson, right? These are women who we know who like have really kind of even tone, tamed,
Yeah.
voices. They don't have like a heavier registry. Or Janet Jackson, for example, is the best example. Doesn't have like a
Mhm.
heavier registry, but in her life as herself and her work and her creation, right? She has been living in such a high decibel, even though the sound of it or the
Yes.
tone of it wasn't loud. So what does that look like for us? And at the very least, for us to have the language to begin to interrogate it, I think is important.
I really appreciate that because it makes me think about the loudness of my silence.
Uh-huh.
So, I've got ADHD. I'm very passionate about what I talk about. So I can literally be like galloping, galloping, galloping with what I say. But there are times when I have to let the needle drop or whatever the saying is so that people can really hear. And what I find is, depending on the space I'm in, sometimes I silence my silence because I can see it is causing discomfort.
Too much. Yes. Yes. That is good. Actually, you said drop the needle. In my culture, in Black American culture, we would just say bars in that moment because that is good. That's I certainly feel like that is still just a reflection of what we're talking about earlier, though, that when we show up in the fullness of ourselves in these bodies, it makes people uncomfortable, and that's the reason why we have you gave the example of being a young girl, louding with your friend, laughing loud with your friends on the bus, and then at some point, and there were very likely people in that space who had a judgment of how loud and happy, right, you all were.
Mhm.
Too much joy, calm down. And
Yeah.
then at some point you begin to embody some of that behavior to judge. You're not only judging a former version of yourself, you're judging a current version of yourself too that you're just not letting out loud, but you're
Mm.
also taking on, you know, like society socialization, like really embracing it, like, oh yeah, I should have been being quiet, or now is a good time for me to, or I'm embarrassed about the fact that I behaved that way. And
Mm.
so it really is just a discomfort, right? It's your discomfort with a former version of yourself that you have a judgment of, or I'll say are, because I think we all kind of experience this, our discomfort with former versions of ourselves that we have judgments of, because of this version of ourselves who has been more deeply engrossed in the idea of be quiet, don't take up too much space, da da da, whatever. So even taking up space with a pause, y'all go ahead and deal with what I just said. It
Mm.
makes people feel uncomfortable, but people feel uncomfortable when we talk, when we're quiet, when we move, when we steal, when we jump, when we skip, right? There is nothing. So it just comes back to, it makes sense for us to just be loud in all the ways that, if that's a mic drop, then that's a mic drop. If that's
Yeah.
singing into the microphone louder, that's singing into the microphone louder. And people will just have to deal with their discomfort in their own, time in their own space. So I appreciate that.
So I was going to go to Ghana, but I'm going to stick a pin in Ghana for a moment
Okay.
with what you said about the discomfort. What I have found is that the discomfort dissipates when we are in the caring role. So I'm speaking to what you talked about in your book. I label it as the mamification of Black women. Like
Yeah,
when we
Angela
are
Davis.
in the mammy role,
Uh-huh.
that's all good. That's great.
Yeah.
How has your relationship with womanism helped you to see that mammy role and leave it where it is so that you can be the woman you are as opposed to a perpetual caretaker?
I actually don't know that I've ever had a real relationship with being mammy.
Oh,
The language, the mamification of Black women, I actually got from Angela Davis, who wrote an essay about it, and that's what I'm referencing in the book when I talk about this. Really, just fleshing out like this role that Black women were just put into, and in some ways, we do kind of live into it, with language like we're the mother of the earth and da 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 whatever. And even you see it with Kamala. Where Drew Barrymore called her Mamala.
oh
What we need
yes,
right now is a Mamala.
yes.
Girl,
No, you need a
like,
president.
not asking the like a man to be the dad of the country. So why are you doing this to this black woman? There's something, and y'all didn't ask Hillary to be our mom. So there's something very specific
Indeed.
about this black femme, experience that people just want to come and just take and suckle and suckle. And as I'm thinking about this, I really don't know that I've ever historically really leaned into that role externally from my family, right? Certainly in my family, there are ways that I end up being a caretaker just because it's, family and my own enmeshed. I talk about that in therapy. That's not a public
Yes.
intellectual conversation. But very possibly because I'm the youngest child.
Okay.
And so and in many ways have been, even though my sisters are just a few years older than me, in many ways I grew up kind of being babied a little bit to a certain extent. So I know what it feels like to be taken care of. And I've kind of moved through the world a little bit looking for and expecting that reality for myself. Now take that familial understanding and then transpose on top of that the fact that I also grew up in a very in a lot of ways militant, activist space, both from, being born and raised in the Black church and being a member of the NAACP since I was a small girl. And, just what felt very important to my family was, civil rights and liberation, et cetera, et cetera.
Hmm.
So there also is something very indignant in me as a young Black girl in a very white space that's kind of like, I'm not doing that, you do it. Right. And so it, I've jokingly, say very often, like I'll pull up these things in my past little posts that'll come up in my time, my memories, and I'll be like, was it a surprise that this is who I became? Like, really, is this really a surprise that this is what happened? Because I really was in elementary school saying, I think you should, to a teacher, I think you should calm down because you don't want my mom to come up here. Right? Like, I have been for a very long time some version of this EbonyJanice, and there's some privilege to that, of course, but I don't know that I have an intimate relationship actually with personally with the mamification.
Yeah.
But do I see it? Do I see the ways that people have I'm done with this sermon. My perfect example of this is my grandmother used to do domestic work. And there's a family, this woman has to be in like her 70s now. And to this day, every single time she comes across someone from my family, this maybe like a month ago, and my grandmother has been gone from this earth for about 8-9 years now, but maybe like a month ago, my cousin, one of my guy cousins, texted in the group chat and said, in the cousin group chat and said, I met this lady today, and he said her name. And when she found out who I was, she said, your grandma used to, she didn't say your grandma, she said, Emma, said my grandma's first name. Emma used to take care of us when we were children and clean our house. She has been telling that story for like what, 50, 60, 70 years at this point. It's like, lady, you have no capacity to see my grandmother who went on to do other work outside of domestic work, right? That was not the end of her story. You have no capacity to see her as anything but no handle, Emma, not Miss Emma, not Miss Baxley, not mother, not sister, not nothing. Emma, when you were a baby when you met her. So the fact that you still calling this lady Emma, right? And so I obviously have these external examples of like the ways that people
Yeah.
put Black women and Black femme folk into certain roles and struggle to take them out, because my own grandmother is like, this has never happened to me. This lady has never said this to me, but she said it to like cousins and aunts and, and to my mom on an occasion or two. And I just been waiting for the day for her to say it to me. So I really
I'm
like,
waiting for her to say it to me because I'll be like, my friend, you said what? You said what?
Emma, as soon as she said Emma, I would be like, excuse me? You can't be talking about Mother Emma Jane Baxley. That's not who you could be talking about. A lady who is like 30 years your senior. Honestly, that's not who you could be talking about. But she ain't never said it to me. But if I could get my hands on her, that to say, I've seen it, but it's not necessarily, and quite
Yeah.
possibly because of my upbringing, it's not
Yeah.
necessarily my own lived experience, because there's kind of always been something kind of radical, revolutionary inside of me that's like, no, do it for me. That's
Yeah.
confusing. Why would
I
I do
love
that? I'm
it.
not
I
going to
love
be that.
it. As the eldest daughter, I love it. I love it for you. I love it for us.
I love
And
it.
I'm thinking, right? So, I'm based in the UK. I work with a diverse group of women. And what I have noted, not in my intimate client relationships, but when I've had memberships and things like that, where there's been like numbers of people, what I have noted, particularly when somebody's got a mother wound,
Uh-huh.
that mother wound is absolutely projected onto me. I'm quite warm. You know, I'm a very warm person. I'm quite maternal. I'm a somatic coach. I'm all about your nervous system. So, you know, it's like gentle, gentle, and all of that. And I do notice that it is very prevalent within white women. And I've noted that with Black women, I'm like, come on, use the space, let the guard down. You can breathe here. Come on, come on, come on. And I do think, speaking to that person's experience of your grandmother, that there is really deeply entrenched systemic programming that very subconsciously, in some cases consciously, creates an environment where many people think, Black woman, you owe me care. That's your role. That's what you're
Mhm.
supposed to do. And it's
Mhm.
interesting that you talked about suckling, because when I first started working with my therapist, who is absolutely wonderful, she was like, you got to stop breastfeeding everybody. And I was like, damn, I want my boobs back. I want them for me. Yes,
Period. I, I
exactly.
I appreciate very specifically you pointing out that white women in a disproportionate, you know, uh, ways in their behavior, it is more often them than any other group of people. Because I do want to note that this woman's brother has never behaved that way. I've known him since I was a little girl. I've seen him around because he was a coach in the school system, and he has never behaved that way. So it's like, how did this white boy grew up into a white man who was cared for by my grandmother, had the capacity to see me as EbonyJanice and not as Emma's granddaughter, Emma, the one
Mm,
that used to take care of us, right? And so I'm not trying to give him too much, right? Because he's still got his own, white man stuff. But I do want to
yeah.
acknowledge that there's something very particular that white women really struggle with when it comes to feeling neat, having this desire to be held and be taken care of, particularly as it pertains to Black women. And
Mm.
actually, I give this example in the book of the time that a white woman. I just got done presenting in grad school. What my project was in this particular class was on Black
Oh,
women's body image
yes.
as a justice issue, and I'm sitting like with one of my legs under. On the seat underneath my body, and I have my cell phone sitting on my leg, the leg that's tucked under me, and I'm actually breaking up with my boyfriend at the time, pretty much throughout the whole class. So I'm not thinking about anything. I stop
Mm-hmm.
long enough to do my presentation, and then
Mm-hmm.
I go back to under the table breaking up. So because I'm sitting on my right leg, I'm kind of shifted facing towards the right, and she's to the left of me. So I had already had issues with her throughout this class experience because I had introduced myself to her 4 times. Let's like it was her first time ever meeting me in her life. Let's keep in mind that I was the only cisgender Black woman in full-time high residency at this institution. So she was more forgettable than I was.
Yeah.
Like, just
Yeah.
in general, she's more forgettable than me, but she was definitely more forgettable than the only cisgender Black woman in this space,
Mm-hmm.
period. So it's her turn for her presentation. And I point out that we had already had beef because I never let her off the hook with that. The second time she introduced herself to me, like it was our first time meeting, I said, and I'm going to say her name actually, I said, Kalika, we sat next to each other like 2 months ago and had a full blown conversation. I could tell you the origin of your name. That's how much we talked. So the fact that you're introducing yourself to me again is really wild to me. I'm concerned. The third time, I really was like, is this a joke? Because we've had this conversation. The fourth time, I was just like, girl, get out my face. Because you got to
Honestly,
be
because
joking
this
with
is
me.
violent now.
So we had already had energy. So it's her turn to present. When it's her time, she says, I think I'm going to actually pass and leave the classroom because I'm not really feeling safe or held in this space. And so everybody is, getting ready to give her energy. And she goes on and she says, Like, for example, the way that EbonyJanice has been sitting with her back to me the whole time, I immediately just started cracking up laughing. I said, girl, literally in real life, 27 seconds ago, I just got done with the presentation entitled Black Women's Body Ownership is a Justice Issue. And here you are trying to dictate what I'm doing with my body. That's strange.
Mhm.
That's very strange to me. So she get ready to storm out like I'm hurt. And I said, actually, I'm the victim. So stay right here. I'm going to storm out. So I
Yeah,
got up and slammed the door, closed this. Another Black person in the classroom that just cracked up laughing because they knew I wasn't really that affected by it. I
yeah, yeah,
just was
yeah,
being dramatic because you're not going to outdrama me. But it's such a perfect example of like every single time a white woman feels like she's not getting enough attention or she's not getting enough energy or she's not getting whatever it is that she feel like she want from you.
hmm,
It's like, give me your attention. Girl,
yeah,
I really don't be thinking about you, but a whole other level, I'm breaking up with my man right now, right? Like, can you, like, I'm not even thinking about you. No capacity to sit with that because they're not getting what they want, what they think they deserve. And so now you need to give it to me or I'm going to cause violence, right?
yeah,
I'm going to cause, chaos in this space. And I think that it's just interesting to point out how in general, it do be white women more than it be anybody else. Like,
yeah,
gimme, gimme,
yeah.
gimme. I don't want to though. And I don't have
Because
to
the
either.
system has infantilized them. And a
Very much
current
so.
example of that is whatever the gymnast's name who was talking trash about the American gymnastics team
Right, right, right.
and then crying crocodile tears asking Simone Biles after she had rinsed her out, asking her to tell your people. Simone didn't have anything to do with that.
And in the words of Lauryn Hill, it could all be so simple, but you'd rather make it hard. It
Hello?
doesn't, it could all be so simple. You created this,
Yeah,
you started this, and
yeah,
now I'm gonna finish it. And here we are.
yeah, yeah,
Here we are.
absolutely. Absolutely. I'd like to go back to your grandmother.
Okay.
So is Miss Emma your maternal?
Yes.
Okay, so I want to talk about ancestral support and courage.
Uh-huh.
And there's a quote, well, I'm quoting your book where your grandmother gives you wise counsel. So you're having a prayerful moment in commune with your grandmother. And she says, whatever you say you want to be, don't
Uh-huh.
stop being that. Be who you say you are. Do what you say you're going to do. Don't be like us. Be brave.
Yes.
Can you talk some more about that in particular and your relationship with your ancestors?
Yes, my grandmother's one of my besties, both in life and in the eternal. And actually, that story, I was doing a recapitulation meditation, and my grandmother visited me in this meditation. She was still alive at the time, and
Oh, yes,
visited
she
me.
passed
And
afterwards.
yeah, 10 days later, but visited me in that meditation time and just dropped that on me. Don't be like us. Do what you say what you're going to do. If you say you're a teacher, teach. If you say you're a preacher, preach. If you say you're a writer, write. And I love the fact that I document so well because I posted that actually on Facebook that day. So people can't be like, your grandma actually she did. I'm not making this up after the fact. 10
Hmm.
days later, my grandmother transitioned to the eternal. And I felt this lady was really like one of my best friends. And so, of course, that it was devastating. But simultaneously, one of my friends, Bettina Turner, says to me, watching you at your grandmother's funeral, I knew you was going to act a fool. So the fact that you were so like, well, just was such a surprise to me. And I feel like my grandmother's visitation made it possible for me to stay in my body. Like,
Hmm.
we did the work of loving each other while she was alive. And even before she left this earth, she made sure to communicate with me. Let me give you some crystal clear information that will
Yeah,
support you. And I even think that the reason why my grandmother visited me is because I was in the midst of my theological shift and I could receive it as such. I didn't demonize this idea of my grandmother's alive in the bed in Sandusky, Ohio. I'm here in Atlanta, Georgia, but here I am having this full-blown encounter with her with these words that are so clear. It's her voice. It's what she would say for sure. And so that experience really propelled me into my ancestral veneration journey, right? That if my grandmother, while living, could give me a message in the spirit, what is possible with my grandmother in the spirit realm, that I don't
Mm-hmm.
ever have to be without her wise counsel. I don't have to ever be without her wisdom. I don't have to ever, feel like I'm making it up, that what Toni Morrison talks about, our spiritual imagination. She says that because of what happened with the loss, particularly for Black American people who are descendants of enslaved Africans, because of what was lost in, there's no documentation of certain things. We
Mm-hmm.
have to trust our spiritual imagination like it is the gospel.
Yeah.
That if the rocks have memories, that's from Zora Neale Hurston, that if the rocks have memories, then certainly we have memories as well. We have memories deep within. And so I trust when I hear my ancestor's voice, or just a knowing comes to me, and I know, I know where that came from. I know what that's about. I
Yeah.
trust it like it's the truth, and I never try to talk myself out of, oh no, that was me. That wasn't me. If I was that wise, I would have did it already. That
Yeah.
came to
Yeah.
me
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
something. It's a perfect example. I'm done with this sermon. This is a perfect example of my grandmother.
I love you're done with this sermons. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it so much. And people, can you see why I'm telling you this woman's brain is fantastic? I love, love, love. And I want to skip to Ghana. So
Mhm.
I know that you spent time there. And
Yes.
my sister lives there. So I've been a few times. And I had an experience when I went to Cape Coast Castle.
Okay.
I went there with my intellect on. My brain was ready. I was going
Okay.
to take in that information. I was going to alchemize that information, and it was going to become something. I walked into the castle and I started to feel nauseous. And I
Uh-huh.
thought, it's fine. Toxic productivity is my jam. I can switch off my body, jump into my brain. I can dissociate like the best of them. We were in the male dungeon, and the guide started talking about that experience. EbonyJanice, when I tell you, I started to have a really strong somatic experience. Inside my body, it felt like whoop, whoop,
Ooh.
whoop. I was with my mum and my daughter, and they carried on with the tour. I said, I'm going to the bathroom. I didn't know what wanted to happen first. I thought that everything within me was going to explode.
Uh-huh.
I just needed to sit down and breathe. And then I tried to continue with the tour. I just couldn't. My
Yeah.
mum and my daughter did their thing. My daughter kept coming and checking on me. I was like, I'm fine, I'm fine. Every single ancestor that had anything to do with that castle
Ooh.
communicated through me that day.
Uh-huh.
And they said to me, you have to feel this. It was literally, when Black people say, if you can't hear, you must feel. It was
Uh-huh.
literally today, our daughter, you're going to feel this. And I was
Today.
told, literally today. And I was told
Uh-huh.
very resolutely that I had to stop suffering. They have
Uh-huh.
already done the suffering. They are
Uh-huh.
standing tall for me to stand on their shoulders.
Ooh.
I came, it was such a surreal experience. I could not dissociate. I could not escape my somatic experience. I could not
Uh-huh.
leave that discomfort. That discomfort was serving a purpose. And then I came back to England. So prior to that, I had done a book proposal and I had done a version of the mammying thing. I
Uh-huh.
worked with an editor who was wonderful, and she softened my words. And I thought, well, she knows what she's doing. That's how it's supposed to be. And I don't want people to read this and feel so uncomfortable they can't read it. So if that's what it's got to be, that's what it's got to be. So the publisher that contacted me initially about writing a book, if I'd considered writing a book, she said she really liked the proposal and it was very good, but it wasn't as strong as what she had seen me posting on social media.
Uh-huh.
So I thought, you know what? I just need to leave it alone. It felt like tea that hadn't been brewed yet. And then ancestors communicated, and I thought, right, I just need to write what I'm supposed to write.
Mm-hmm.
And if publishers, it didn't work out. The book deal didn't work out then. So I
Okay.
came back and I thought, I just need to write what I need to write. And I'm so passionate about it. If publishers don't want it, fine, I'll self-publish. I did a workshop 2 days after I got back from Ghana who then turned out to be my commissioning editor, came to the workshop. She says she saw my name, she likes what I do, so she decided to make sure she had cover at the stand she was at, so she could come to
Uh-huh.
my workshop. And she was asking me about a book, and I said, when it's ready, I will let you know. And my agent, she kept like, come on, Tammy, do it. Come on, Tammy, do it. You don't want to miss out. You don't want to miss out. And my granddad visits me regularly. And in Sierra Leone, there's a saying, water that's for you won't run past you. And so he said,
Uh-huh.
water that's for you won't run past you. And he said to me, you've got to stop being messy. I am quite all over the place. And so I just
Uh-huh.
sat with it. Around the time of my granddad's birthday, I finished the book proposal and I worked with an editor because I write too much. I'm always writing loads and loads. And she's like, oh, brilliant. This is activism. I was like, oh, thank God. She gets it. Sent
Uh-huh.
it off. Thinking, I've literally just said all over the place capitalism, white supremacy, patriarchy, capitalism, white supremacy, patriarchy, trinity of oppression, trinity of oppression. And because I was doing what I was supposed to do, because I was honoring like all of
Yeah.
our ancestors, because they were all chatting, it was 6 publishers that came and said, we want to offer you book deals.
Uh-huh.
Had I not been obedient and
Yeah.
listened,
Yeah.
who knows what I would have done? Something that I would have been kind of like, oh, when people receive it, because it wouldn't have been
Right, right,
true.
right.
And the publisher I went with was a publisher I didn't think would be interested. And they said, we just want you to write your book. There was
Yes.
no take this out, don't say this. There was none of that whatsoever. They just wanted to be doulas for the book I was birthing.
And they had no choice because the ancestors had already made a way. I talk all the time actually about how that's the reason why I feel like the most important work that I do is supporting Black women in across the globe and returning to their sovereignty, because as sovereign beings, you know, who can stop you? It is usually the filtered version of ourselves that misses out on opportunities, that and or the filtered abridged version of ourselves ends up in spaces where now we got to keep up with that act, and it will kill you, right?
Yeah,
And that's not a metaphor for something. You will have a knot in your stomach, in your chest. Your body will begin to react to not being actual you. And
yeah,
so actual you is the major key. It really is. Actual
yeah,
you is going to open doors that fake you either could not have gotten through or could not sustain. So, of course, there is, going back to Latricia's loudness, of course, there are people and institutions who don't want your loudness, right? But if that is an authentic expression of yourself, to go into a space and have to hold in your loudness is going, like, look at what happens even when you talk about holding in.
yeah.
There's something that's like a clinch, just like a closure.
Mm-hmm.
There's not the
Mm-hmm.
free flow of,
Mm-hmm.
of your own essence, of God's goodness, of your
Mm-hmm.
ancestral energy. There's no free flow through that. So there's no abundance in that. So the
Mm.
abundance comes from opening up your hands, opening up your heart, opening up your arms, and just kind of leaping into the sky and saying, this is a true story. This is who I am.
Yeah,
And whoever is for me will receive it and be blessed and be enlarged, by me showing up as a full, I call it a full pour of myself, not a sip of myself, a full pour of myself. But
mm.
if it's not for you, it's okay for us to close the door. It is
Yeah.
safer, in fact, for both of us that we close this door. It might even be safer for both of us that we even burn the bridge down so
Please
that we
do.
don't try to we don't even try this, because
Yeah,
this is not what's best for you. It doesn't make you right and me wrong. It doesn't make me wrong, me right or you wrong. It's just the alignment, the story, the connection that we needed to make in this lifetime and these bodies was not that. But for the authentic me, whoever my voice, whoever my body, whoever my, sound, whoever my loudness resonates with, here I am. This is what
and so it
you're
is.
not. This is what you
Mm.
came for. And it is good for me that I get to be that. And guess what? It's good for you that I get to be that. It makes us all
Honestly,
better. So yeah, like
truly.
the writing the book that you didn't mean to write would have been devastating, because now you got a book sitting on possibly unsold, you know, people not even buying it, not moved
I'm
by
having
it.
to talk about it continuously.
Right. And having to talk about it continuously, or people talking publicly about your work in a negative way, and it wasn't even your work. Right? Like
Exactly.
you're getting criticism for something that wasn't even you. Guys, give it another chance out
Criticize me
there.
on what is. Yeah,
Yeah.
I had an
Like,
Amazon
yeah.
review recently that said something along the lines of, if you're a white woman, don't buy this book. This book is racist. I don't mind that because, like, you've read the book, like you've read that, like it's not made up. And I knew
Uh-huh.
people would feel like that way. And thank you so much, because some people bought the book because of that review. So thank you very much. Thank you for that.
Uh-huh.
Before we wrap, I want to move into imagination,
Mm.
because that is what enchanted me in the first place, especially being a child whose dad would be like, your head is full of play, you are daydreaming all the time. So I just want to read something from my book where I say, productivity is not just about getting things done, it's about the journey of life. It's about beginnings and endings, creation and stagnation, love and loss. It can be an opportunity for transformation. Our productivity can be a conduit for our imagination, helping us to dream ourselves into new possibilities that once felt impossible. So much of what we experience in life was previously a figment of someone's imagination. In the words of author EbonyJanice Moore, we can dream ourselves free. Please, could you tell us about dreaming ourselves free?
Yeah, you said something earlier actually that I want to quote um properly, or I want to cite properly. I can't remember the exact thing that you said, but you were talking about something I said in the book about uh what are you going to do for freedom today? Something I can't remember
Yes,
exactly what
it
you
was
said,
your
but
cousin who
yeah,
embodied.
thank you. I actually got that language from Pearl Cledge, one of my favorite authors. There's a little Pearl Cledge section. Um, who has written both fiction and nonfiction poetry. She used to be a major contributor for Essence years ago. And Pearl Cledge has created this world in her books. Like all of these books are standalone books, but there's a community that these people come from. So they kind of know each other. Major characters kind of show up. They're not major characters in multiple books, but they'll kind of show up like just as mentioned, da 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 whatever. But there's a particular character, or there's a particular space in Southwest Atlanta. It's a real space. It's really Southwest Atlanta. It's really where the HBCUs are: Spelman, Morehouse, Morris Brown, Clark Atlanta. It's real. They're real monuments like the Shrine of the Black Madonna, and real spaces that are mentioned in this book. But she's crafted these two blocks that belong to this a universe that she's writing. And in those two blocks, it's run by this character named Blue Hamilton, who was the first man I ever loved. Mind you, this is fiction for the record, but the first man I ever loved was Blue Hamilton, because Blue Hamilton basically decided one day this is going to be a safe space to live. And the rules were very simple. The men will work and act like they got some sense, and the women and children will be safe, and that's it.
Mm.
And so the stories that she crafts in this little universe is all under this idea that the women and children should be safe. The men gonna work and act like they got some sense. And there's a character where all of this is connected to the dreaming myself free, for the record. So I'm not on a Baptist preacher rant. So there's a character who works at a newspaper, and it's an old historic newspaper that has existed for years. It's a fiction, but in this book it's existed for years. It's called the Centennial, and they report on, it's black owned, and they report on like all the amazing things that are happening, and they were there with Martin Luther King, and it's all this story kind of that she built around it. And the way that she answers the phone is, "Thank you for calling the Centennial. Something, and don't forget to do something for freedom today." So I got that from a book that I read when I was like 18
Ooh.
years old. And it is now my voicemail. You've reached the voicemail of EbonyJanice. Please leave a detailed message and don't forget to do something for freedom today. I have kept that language with me since I was a teenager, basically. But what Pearl Cledge does really phenomenally inside of this universe that she's created is she writes about free women, and the lives that they live have always just been so profound to me. Like, oh, keep in mind, I'm like 18, 19 years old when I'm introduced to this universe. Oh, I could potentially have a job where I'm a consultant and I just get $30,000 lump sums of money to just go consult. A young Black girl from a lower middle class family,
Mhm.
certainly working class, not middle class, working class for sure. So I'm saying
Yeah.
lower, for working class family with parents who didn't have much education, but who saw the value of education to the point that that was the way that they were pushing me
Yeah.
even into careers that were necessarily in alignment with my actual identity or what I knew about myself even as a young girl. But I'm going to school for political science and I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. But I have this dream, I have this vision because Pearl Cledge has created these free women and now introduced them to my psyche. I can reach for them in my imagination and say, what if this was possible? What if this was possible?
Mm.
What if this was possible? And just the ability to say, what if this was possible when thinking about what it would mean for me to do something for freedom today, or thinking about what could be possible when thinking about the lover that I'll choose, or what if this is possible when thinking about the way that I want to, provide for myself, this whole universe. So that's where Dream Yourself Free really comes from. It really comes into this idea of like, I play around so much. I need you to tell me your dad's name because I'm going to say this a million times. Your head is full of play. I will
Your head
say
is
that
full
a
of
million.
play.
I love it so much. So we'll come back to that. But that I play around so much. Every day I'm playing in my head. My head is so full of play. I'm playing like, what if that's possible? What if that's possible? And as soon as I really get it in my mind that that might be possible, it's over for you hoes. Like I'm about to be on a mission to like, what does my body need to do in order for me to move into that? What does my schedule from day to day need to do for me to move into that? Oh, I've imagined this. I saw myself sitting on a gold couch. I can't determine when it will happen, but I can go get the gold couch. So
Yeah.
I go into the spirit, into the dream, into the imagination, into the play realm so frequently that I just take the information that is there for me and I do whatever it is that I can do from what I saw, right? I can't tell you if I say I'm gonna be a multimillionaire, I saw it in my imagination. I know it's possible. I can't tell you when the multi-millions are gonna
Yes.
happen, but oh, she had a long 30-inch bust down in the vision. So let me get a 30-inch bust down, right? So like what
Yes.
can I do? And just moving into that embodiment. But the inspiration for so much of that play, even though I grew up, a very dreamy kind of girl, the inspiration for so much of that, just getting even more clear about that, is like the free women that I either know or the free women that some of my favorite authors have introduced to me through their characters that just kind of had me like,
Mm.
oh, I didn't even know to think about that. I want to dream about that. I want to see what's possible in that.
Absolutely. And due to you and what you have shared about dreaming yourself free and what I call proper use of my imagination, because I can use my, well, I was just about to say I can use my mind, my imagination for anxiety. But what I
Uh-huh.
know is when I'm suppressing the creativity, that's when my imagination goes over to anxiety. So I have time blocked out in my calendar. So I don't have other things booked in. I've got my daydreaming time and I sit in
Yeah.
my pink contemplation chair and I sit down and I look outside my window and I daydream. I listen to like some of the most astounding downloads have come literally from me just sitting in that pink chair,
Mm.
daydreaming and listening to life. And there are many times I don't want to do it because the toxic productivity motor is
Right,
you
right, right.
should do some work. You've got da da da. But That's how I respect my body. That's how I keep promises to myself. And when I forget, because I always do, I can remember. And when I remember, I sit my ass down in that chair and I listen and I dream
It's
and I
literally the
play.
work. It is there is this deacon at this church I used to go to that used to say there's more work done in prayer than in work itself. And I still hold true to that. And I would tweak the language and say there is more work done in your imagination, in your dreaming, in your fantasy, in your playfulness than in work itself. That some of
Hmm.
the greatest success of my life has happened, even understanding like, oh, I'm doing it wrong, how I don't know how to fix it. I will go into my imagination and see myself doing the thing, and oh, turn the heat up. I come out of the visualization, I turn the heat up and it works, right? That there is more work, more brilliance, more, shifting that happens in prayer and imagination and dreaming and playing and fantasy than in sitting down and just, oh, I'm gonna just grind it out. You're doing it wrong. Stop.
Yeah,
Go,
yeah,
sit down, take a breath. And so I really wish that I could get people, particularly Black women, to believe that. That is part of my goal in life, is to
yeah,
really get a remnant of Black women to really believe that I am more productive, more creative, more outstanding, more dynamic when I take the time to just chill, to just
yeah,
be still, to just
yeah,
listen for God, to listen for myself, to listen for
yeah,
spirit, than
yeah,
I am when I'm running a marathon trying to do every single thing. I'm much more productive. I used to work from sun up to sundown picking that cotton. No, I literally used to be just working all day long. And then I have now, over years, it's been about 7, 8 years now, have gotten it down to like I probably work like 2 hours a day. How do you go from like 10-hour work days to 2-hour work days? Because I'm more productive now in the 2 hours, because
yeah,
I got all the answers, all the downloads, all the
yeah,
like, oh, I know how I'm going to do this. I'm
yeah,
situated now. I can sit down and do the writing.
yeah,
Whereas when I was working for 10 hours a day, I'm weary. I'm doing a little piece. I'm distracted, right? 2 focused hours of work. That's my story, right? But 2 focused hours, the equivalent of 10 unfocused hours, is wild to me.
100%.
So the
Yeah.
major key is imagination, fantasy, stillness, ease. You're like really leaning into those realities.
And because I know that some people that listen to that will say, well, it's all right for you. You did this, that, and the other. I was about to sing. I'm going to. Life is what you make it. So, darling, my dear, try and make it. If you make it, you will. And it can start with 5 minutes. That 5 minutes on a
Factually,
regular basis has a compounding effect.
factually, you teach yourself, you train your psyche, you train your spirit, you train your body to be able to stay longer. When I started my mindfulness journey, I could not meditate for longer than 60 seconds. I set that alarm for 60 seconds and I'd be in the 60 seconds like, is it over yet? And so there's that. And then I also feel like I never ever perform my poverty, but I also feel like, because now I'm sitting here, my hair's blowing in the wind, I got, all these books, because that's some money right there, right? So
Mhm.
I want to be crystal clear that it wasn't always this. There is a point when I was, I said I don't perform my poverty, but I just want to say that when I really started this journey, I was a struggling grad school student. Like no money, like grants, and
Yeah,
begging was how I was getting by. And so literally I was renting a room from a friend of mine in the Bay Area, Danae Black, and I could see myself sitting on that floor with my dog sleeping in the little closet right next to me, right? Sitting on that floor, like, here's my 60 seconds. This is what I got to offer. And
yeah,
so I feel like that's important, because when people say stuff like, "Oh, that worked for you," and but of course you have the privilege of da 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 whatever. There was no privilege. I was in grad school.
yeah,
I did not have money. I was scratching and surviving and hanging in a child line. Ain't we lucky we got them good times, right? And I was still finding my 60 seconds, and then my 90 seconds, and then my 5 minutes, and
yes,
then my right. I was I was forcing myself to, even if it was on the bus, even if it was on the walk to, the corner, whatever it was, I was
Mm-hmm.
making myself have that time because I knew, because of the great Chinese proverb, and I am done with this sermon, but the great Chinese proverb that says, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today.
Now, I love that, love that, love that. Okay, so my final three questions that I ask
Okay.
everybody. What is one actionable step our listeners can take today towards their own personal liberation?
Well, we just said it. Give yourself 60 seconds. If you're not doing anything to sit down on a daily basis, set an alarm on your phone for 60 seconds and just be still. And that may seem so insignificant, but literally you have to. I'm growing lavender. I'm going to be brief. I'm growing lavender from seed. It is so dramatic, honestly. Like, do the lavender want to get water at night or in the morning? Does it want to be heated? Does it want to be under a grow light? Like, what does it want? What does the lavender really want? And so in the process of growing lavender, I'm really learning to like just be patient with the bud coming through, and then it's growing a little bit more, and then it's growing a little bit more. And so you have to be like lavender growing from seed. Give yourself
Mm,
just permission to be a little bud trying to peek through the dirt, and then give yourself permission to like grow slow, and then give yourself permission to bud a little bit more, and then give yourself permission for it to be 2 years before we see the fruit, right? Like, give yourself permission for that. But 2 years from now, you will be so thrilled that you took those 60 seconds, because now you got lavender for free in your home.
a whole word, a whole word. Okay, next, how can individuals contribute to the collective liberation and empowerment of their communities?
Take care of yourself. Do like actual deep integrity work. Integrity is the most powerful manifestation tool that you could ever access. Like, actually being who you are supposed to be, actually doing what you say you're going to do, is the most powerful manifestation work. Because if you can trust yourself, then we can trust you better, because you're showing up as actual you, and that's safe for all of us. So yeah, do the deep healing work so that you're not traumatizing folk that's trying to get
Yeah.
untraumatized, right? Like, contributing to the continual traumatization of the rest of us. So yeah, do your work.
Do you
Integrity.
know, I'm going to check in with myself 6 times a day. Don't ask me why 6 times a day. That's just what it is. Are you being actual you? That's I'm going to
Is
have
this
flash up on
you?
my phone. Are you being actual you?
I
Are you
love
being
that.
actual you?
Yeah.
That's going to be. Thank you so much for that. And then
Yeah.
finally, what are some systemic changes you believe are essential for achieving true liberation and equity for all?
Well, I think that, but the first, I was thinking about institutions. When you say systemic, I instantly think of institutions. But then when I think of institution, the first two institutions, which are the first two, the most important institutions in my own upbringing, is family and the church. And so I think
Hmm.
systemically, if family and church can refer back to number two, which is the deep healing and integrity work,
Yes.
then that would drastically change a lot of things. But it would also go on another level, right? Like, if family and church, if we could heal in those spaces, then the way that we show up in the rest of our liberation work, as it pertains to, figuring out how to get the government to actually do what they say they're going to do, right? Think about family, think about black family, black church doing healing work. Then think about a major issue that is, right, like, the Paris Olympics, that Muslim people couldn't wear hijab,
Yeah.
or the fight for trying to determine that this black, or this woman of color is really a man, right? And so
Oh
having
yeah.
issues with that, even if this person is a trans identifying person, and they're not, they're actually,
Yeah.
born biologically a woman, right? So a lot of those issues really are moral issues that stem from Christianity, that stem from, a particular religion. And because
Hmm.
that religion then becomes the moral compass for an entire country, it impacts the government, it impacts other institutions. So really, if the family and the church, or the family and the religious institution, could do the healing
Yeah.
work, it would shift and shape the way that we vote. It would shift and shape the way that we, pursue relationship with others. It would shift and shape the way that we are in right relationship with the universe, right?
Mm.
So many things are impacted, I think, by the fact that we're out of alignment and not taking
Yeah,
care of ourselves from a
yeah.
familial institutional perspective or space, and from a, religious institutional space.
Absolutely, absolutely. Oh, EbonyJanice, this has been it's like aloe vera. It's an adaptogen. If it's too dry, it brings moisture. If it's too moist, it brings, balances it out. Thank you so much for your time and your energy. If people would like to connect with you further, where's the best place online for them to find you?
I'm at EbonyJanice everywhere. EbonyJanice.com is, the central hub. And I have a little newsletter, and I don't spam because I don't like spam either.
Exactamando. Brilliant. I will make sure there are links in the show notes. Once again, thank you so much for your time and your energy.
My love. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me on the Liberated Woman Podcast. Your time and attention is valued. I hope you found today's conversation insightful, inspiring, and even galvanizing. If you enjoyed the episode, please like, rate, review, subscribe, comment, and share. Like many things in our digital experience, the algorithm rules, so your interaction is vital. Your support helps me reach more listeners and attract impactful guests. Tune in for more empowering discussions and practical tips to help you live life on your own terms. Until next time, I'm Tamu Thomas, reminding you to embrace your joy. Podcast produced by me, Tamu Thomas, edited by Biongolia, podcast music by James Anderson.